So one afternoon about 10 years ago, my mom gave me a call to tell me that my grandfather was very near the end, that I should get on a plane immediately to come say goodbye to him. And on that same day, about 2 hours later, my wife Katie took a pregnancy test and discovered that our first child was on the way. So I know I'm going to probably come off like a jerk saying this, but personally, for me, I find it a little hard to get emotionally involved in the deaths of other people's grandparents. It's just like a personal failing, I think. Like it's sad, but they were old. That's life. But I'm still going to try to really paint my grandpa for you so he can be more than just a kind of fill in the blank old guy whose time had come. So my grandpa's name was Marvin Chester Wald. This is a little reflection there. There you go. That's him and my grandma there. I always loved his name, Marvin Chester. Those are just great names. He was funny. He was smart. He was playful. As little kids, he used to encourage us to play with this like loose roll of skin on his neck. He called it his skin beard. He used to put my brother Tony up on his shoulders and parade around the house singing the World War I classic, "When Tony Goes Over the Top, He No Think of the Barbershop." If there's anyone watching of Italian descent, I apologize. Grandpa was not perfect. He was very impatient with waiters, sometimes bordering on rude. He had a real temper. I interviewed him once on camera for a college class, and he brought up his temper. He said it was something he'd always considered a failing. But Grandpa knew what it was to have fun. He used to take me and my brother back behind the house to this old rotting stump and supervise us while we chopped at it with an old hatchet. Much later, after my grandmother died too, when their house was about to be sold and I was taking my final kind of walk around the place saying goodbye, it was the sight of that old stump that really wrecked me, because I realized hacking at that thing with my grandpa was without any doubt one of the happiest moments of my life. My grandpa lived to 97. He was razor sharp almost to the end. And at some point, he lived so long that I eventually like got to the point where I didn't just think of him as my grandpa, but as a guy I really liked. I found myself needling him in exactly the same way I needle my friends. Geez, grandpa, you're really 94? That's not even old. That's ancient. It's like Father Time over here. This made sense that I would speak to him that way because we were friends. In fact, he was one of my best friends. And then he died. And at the exact same moment that the first glimmer of my son emerged. The positive pregnancy test that my wife took that night was the moment that my life as a parent started for real. Before that, who knew? Could we even do it? We knew so many people who had struggled. We knew that wanting to be parents and being able to were not the same thing. So the fact that someone was really growing in there, it really did feel like a miracle. As you can imagine, I had a lot of fantasies about my grandfather's soul passing straight into my embryonic son. I was probably more open to the whole idea of reincarnation at that time than any other point in my life. We decided to give our son my grandpa's Hebrew name, Elimelech, my God is king. I wondered if our son would be like grandpa. I pictured myself telling him stories about grandpa, showing him videos of him, preserving my grandpa for the future. The summer after grandpa's death, Sam was born. I can remember vividly as I crouched in that hospital room, holding my wife's hand as she pushed. I felt myself flashing back to a different hospital room 8 months earlier, holding a different hand. Two moments at the outer edges of life, two lives crisscrossing that chasm which we only crossed twice, one moving into the darkness, the other emerging into the light. Since then, if I'm being honest, the narrative kind of gets a little cloudy. As it turned out, Sam is kind of different than grandpa. My son is sensitive, cautious, thoughtful, analytical. If anything, it's probably my spunky little girl, Phoebe, who's got more of that Marvin Chester fire and sparkle of mischief. Sam has heard a fair amount about grandpa, but whether there's some cosmic connection between them, I don't know. So that extraordinary day when their paths intersected, what does it mean? If you'll just permit me to go Buddhist for a second here on Hanukkah, I'm a longtime meditator, and there's a concept in Buddhist meditation called equanimity from this Pali word upekkha. It refers to that quality within us all that sees sorrow and joy and how life keeps moving between them, but remains steady and present. It's sometimes misunderstood as staying neutral or uninvolved in life, but equanimity is really about being there with the vast swaths of life that are beyond our control. It's often compared to a grandparent's love for their grandchildren, a deep care tempered by perspective, not getting caught up in the specific drama of life. It's a quality I'm sure every one of us could have used more of in 2020. This was supposed to be a story about light in the midst of darkness. But honestly, it hasn't really been my experience that life or God always gives me light in the midst of my darkness. I mean, it definitely happens sometimes, though I just as often feel confronted by darkness and confusion in the midst of joy. Rather, life keeps asking me to hold light and dark mixed together in an infinite palette of colors, harmonies, and dissonances. Life asks me to bid one treasured being farewell into the past in the very same moment I'm welcoming a new one into the future. May we all find the equanimity and the balance to be there for our lives, all of it, the deaths and the births, the joy and the grief, the darkness and the light. Happy Hanukkah.
Amen, amen. Happy Hanukkah. Kol hakavod, Nick. Thank you for sharing such a beautiful reflection and such a powerful and important message for all of us.